Today's video is brought to you by our friends over at Squarespace. You know what's great about summer? Vacation. Time off, a little bit of R&R. It's the perfect time to spend lying on the beach or in the park, daydreaming about that next project you want to start. Fortunately, Squarespace gives you every possible tool you might want to make your dream into a reality. Whether it's a small business, a sports blog, a creative portfolio, or just a page full of the dankest memes, it does not matter. If you can dream it, you can build it with Squarespace. Are you looking to get in and out quick without thinking too much about what your website should look like? Well, bam, use one of their quick, beautiful templates to make a website that's fresh and for you. Or maybe you're more of a hands-on person. You've got lots of opinions and ideas about what exactly your site should look like. Squarespace gives you all of the customization options you could ever want, with no updates, no patches, no technical BS to worry about. And once you're done setting up your website, tinkering with the design if you're so inclined, or maybe just playing with the colors, there are so many extra features that Squarespace provides that your website can thrive. Email campaigns, patronage portals, social integrations, member-only areas, analytics, commercial options, 24/7 customer support, everything you need in one place. So when you're ready to get started on the next project of yours, big or small, if it involves a website, it's got to be with Squarespace. Right now, you can go to squarespace.com for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch your site, go to squarespace.com/brainfood to save 10% of your first purchase of a website or a domain. And now, let's all learn how the US can destroy the world. By nearly every measure, the office of the President of the United States is the most powerful position in the world, its holder presiding over not only the world's largest economy, but also its third largest military and largest arsenal of nuclear weapons. The United States nuclear stockpile currently stands at 3,800 warheads distributed among the three branches of the nuclear triad: Minutemen, land-based ballistic missiles, Trident submarine-launched ballistic missiles, and bomber aircraft armed with free-fall bombs and air-launched cruise missiles. To ensure that this apocalyptic arsenal can be deployed at a moment's notice, anytime and anywhere in the world, the president is at all times accompanied by a device known as the Presidential Emergency Satchel, or nuclear football, the world's deadliest piece of luggage. The need for a mobile system for authorizing nuclear strikes emerged in the aftermath of the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962. Prior to this, a nuclear strike by bombers or missiles stationed in the Soviet Union gave the president at least a half-hour's warning, plenty of time to reach a safe command center like the White House Situation Room or Site R, the Raven Rock Complex in Pennsylvania. But the Soviet placement of short-range missiles in Cuba and later submarines stationed off the American coast shrank this response time to less than 15 minutes. Worst still, American nuclear doctrine at the time was based on the principle of massive retaliation, a single all-or-nothing response using every weapon in the arsenal. This horrified President John F. Kennedy, who later stated, "It is insane that two men sitting on opposite sides of the world should be able to decide to bring an end to civilization." In response, Kennedy drafted a memo asking 4 pointed questions about the nation's nuclear command and control system. Assuming this information from a closely guarded source causes me to conclude that the US should launch an immediate nuclear strike against the communist bloc, does the JCS Emergency Actions File permit me to initiate such an attack without first consulting the Secretary of Defense and/or the Joint Chiefs of Staff? If I called the Joint War Room without giving them advance notice, to whom would I be speaking? What would I say to the Joint War Room to launch an immediate nuclear strike? How would the person who received my instructions verify them? In response to Kennedy's criticisms, Captain Edward Beach, former naval aide to President Dwight Eisenhower, invented the nuclear football, which first entered service around May 1963. Though various models have been used over the years, the current football is housed in a 45-pound aluminium briefcase manufactured by Zero Halliburton, typically carried in a black leather bag or jacket to make it less conspicuous. The device's strange name is derived from an early nuclear war plan codenamed Dropkick, though confusion regarding the exact nature of the football has led to a number of movies and TV shows erroneously depicting it as being literally football-shaped. The football is carried by a presidential aide-de-camp specifically selected for the task. These carriers are drawn on a rotating basis from the 6 service branches: the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Coast Guard, and Space Force, and are always a commissioned officer with a pay grade of 04 or above. To ensure that the football is always within easy reach, the carrier accompanies the president wherever they go, including aboard Air Force One and Marine One, and even in elevators. Since 1963, dozens of officers have carried the football, including future Congressman John Klein. The first woman and the first Coast Guard officer to carry the football was Lieutenant Commander Vivian Creer, who served under President Ronald Reagan. The role is considered both an honor and a supremely stressful position, as Bill Clinton's former carrier, Robert Buzz Patterson, recalls. "You're always kind of on edge. I opened it up constantly just to refresh myself, to always be aware of what was in it, all the potential decisions that the president could possibly make." Though typically referred to in the singular, there are actually 3 nuclear footballs. One follows the president, another follows the vice president in case the president is incapacitated, while a third is kept stored at the White House in case either of the others are damaged or lost. Following an election, the incumbent president retains use of the nuclear football until precisely noon on Inauguration Day, whereupon it is handed over to the president-elect. In the case of the outgoing president not being present at the inauguration, as occurred in 2021, a second football is given to the president-elect at noon, and the outgoing president's nuclear launch codes are electronically deactivated. But what is actually inside the football? Contrary to popular belief, the football does not actually contain any sort of button for launching nuclear weapons directly. Rather, it is one part of a larger system designed to confirm the president's identity, allow them to select the appropriate level of nuclear retaliation, and securely communicate their orders to the military. According to William Gulley, director of the White House Military Office under Presidents Johnson, Nixon, Ford, and Carter, there are 4 things in the football. The Black Book, containing the retaliatory options, a book listing classified site locations, a manila folder with 8 or 10 pages stapled together giving a description of procedures for the emergency broadcast system, and a 3x5-inch card with authentication codes. The Black Book was about 9 by 12 inches and had 75 loose-leaf pages printed in black and red. The book with classified site locations was about the same size as the Black Book, and it was black. It contained information on sites around the country where the president could be taken in an emergency. In photographs, a short antenna can be seen protruding from the football, indicating that it also contains some kind of secure communications device. If the unthinkable happens, and a nuclear strike against the United States was detected, the process of ordering a retaliatory strike would go something like this. First, the president would be pulled aside by the football carrier while a secure communications line is established with the National Military Command Center at the Pentagon. The president would then break open the nuclear biscuit, a small plastic card imprinted with the so-called gold codes, a series of 2-letter call and response codes designed to confirm the president's identity. Once connected to the Pentagon's Deputy Director of Operations, the president would receive a series of challenge codes to which they must provide the proper responses off the biscuit. These codes are updated daily by the NSA, and for added security, several of the letter pairs printed on the biscuit are intentionally meaningless, forcing the president to memorize which ones are relevant. While originally carried in the football itself from Jimmy Carter onwards, most presidents have preferred to carry the biscuit on their person, though this greatly increases the risk of it being lost, something which has happened on several occasions. Jimmy Carter once lost his biscuit when one of his suits was sent off for dry cleaning, while Ronald Reagan was separated from his biscuit following his 1981 assassination attempt when his clothing was cut away by paramedics. In 1998, when President Clinton's football carrier asked him for his biscuit so he could provide an updated version, the president couldn't find it, triggering a frantic weeks-long search. The nuclear football itself has also been fumbled or separated from the president on several occasions, including an amusing incident in which Peter Metzger, one of Ronald Reagan's football carriers, was directed into a different elevator by a colleague and tricked into thinking he had missed the presidential motorcade. In a later interview, Metzger admitted that his heart was racing like a gerbil in a cage until he realized that he was the victim of a practical joke. But apart from the obvious security breach such mishaps represent, they also have the potential to severely disrupt the entire nuclear command and control structure. If a president is unable to confirm their identity, the Pentagon will then contact the vice president, who has a nuclear football of their own. Constitutionally, however, the vice president cannot make executive decisions on behalf of the president without the president's express permission unless the president is dead or otherwise incapacitated. This means that the vice president would be forced to contact the president, who isn't able to confirm their identity anyway, before making any decisions, wasting precious time in the process. But if all goes to plan and the president's identity is confirmed, the president would open the football and go over retaliation options with either the Secretary of Defense or the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. One booklet in the football contains a list of authorized targets classified into 3 categories: nuclear and other weapons of mass destruction, military-industrial facilities, and leadership redoubts like government offices or emergency bunkers. These targets are based on O-Plan 8010, the United States' master nuclear strategy. While much of this plan remains highly classified, it is known that 5 countries are currently authorized for nuclear strike. Russia with 510 targets, China with 130, North Korea with 72, Iran with 60, and Syria with 43. These targets, in turn, can be targeted with multiple combinations of 2,000 1,000 nuclear weapons, 900 of which can be launched at a moment's notice. These strike options are listed in a separate book and are grouped into 3 intensity levels: limited, selected, and major attack options, or what William Gully has dryly referred to as rare, medium, or well done. In addition to these booklets, the attack options are also summarized on a single cartoon-like sheet, with Michael Dobbs, former military aide to Bill Clinton, once comparing it to a Denny's breakfast menu. The sheet was introduced by Jimmy Carter, who found the detailed lists too complicated to analyze in the few minutes of decision time that were available in an emergency. Once the president selects a strike option, this is relayed via the secure Melstar Communications satellite network to the Pentagon, which then converts the order into a 150-character authorization code for transmission to US nuclear forces. In the event ground-based command centers are destroyed by a first strike, the US Strategic Command maintains a fleet of airborne communications platforms known as Looking Glass, or TACAMO, short for Take Charge and Move Out. At least one TACAMO aircraft remains airborne at all times and is in constant contact with every US missile silo, airbase, and nuclear submarine. If a land-based missile launch is authorized, the launch codes are transmitted to 5 two-man launch crew stations around the country, controlling a squadron of 50 Minuteman missiles. Each team opens a safe containing sealed authentication codes, or SAS, and if these match the code sent by the Pentagon, the team enters the strike option selected by the president into the missile guidance computer, re-aiming them from their peacetime targets in the middle of the ocean to their new wartime targets. The 5 teams then retrieve launch keys from their safes and, at a designated time, turn them simultaneously to authorize the launch. Only 2 votes are needed to launch the missiles, making mutinies unlikely. A similar system is used aboard ballistic missile submarines, with only 2 votes from the captain, executive officer, and another designated 2-man team being required to authenticate a launch order. By now, you may have noticed that while this system goes to great lengths to confirm the president's identity, includes no means of evaluating the president's state of mind, nor any checks and balances on their authority. And indeed, this is by design. As Commander-in-Chief of the United States Armed Forces, the president has sole authority over the nation's nuclear weapons and is not required to consult with Congress or any other government department prior to authorizing their use. While military officials such as the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the Secretary of Defense are required to confirm that a nuclear launch order has in fact come from the president, they do not have veto power and are constitutionally obligated to follow the president's orders. If the president is killed or otherwise incapacitated, this unilateral authority passes down the presidential chain of succession to the vice president, Speaker of the House of Representatives, President of the Senate, Secretary of State, and so on. This effectively means, according to journalist Ron Rosenbaum, that any president could, on his own, leave a room, and in 25 minutes, 70 million or more than that would be dead. Short of a full military mutiny, the only constitutional means of preventing a president from authorizing a nuclear strike is to invoke Section 4 of the 25th Amendment, which allows the vice president, cabinet heads, and Congress to declare the president disabled or unfit to execute the duties of the office. But within the military, the president's nuclear veto is so sacrosanct that to question it is considered nearly tantamount to treason. This is evidenced by the case of Minuteman missile crewman Major Harold Herring, who in 1973 asked the following question during a training exercise. How can I know that an order I received to launch my missiles came from a sane president? Herring was immediately pulled from training and given an administrative discharge for failure to demonstrate acceptable qualities of leadership. When Herring appealed the decision, the Air Force maintained that the lawfulness of a launch order was beyond the executing officer's need to know. To this, Herring replied, I have to say, I feel I do have a need to know because I am a human being. It is inherent in an officer's commission that he has to do what is right in terms of the needs of the nation despite any orders to the contrary. You really don't know at the time of key turning whether you are complying with your oath of office. Yet despite his appeal, the Board of Inquiry upheld the decision and discharged Herring from the Air Force. He later became a long-haul truck driver and a counselor. While giving the president unchecked authority to use nuclear weapons might seem like a disaster waiting to happen, it is important to understand the basic tenets of US nuclear doctrine. For the US nuclear stockpile to serve as an effective deterrent, it must be capable of being deployed quickly, at least within the 15 to 30 minutes it typically takes for a nuclear missile to reach its target. Otherwise, an enemy would be able to use a preemptive strike to decapitate the US leadership and destroy its ability to retaliate. At the same time, however, the nuclear arsenal must be protected against unauthorized use by rogue military officers. The only way of achieving these two goals simultaneously is to give the president sole authority to authorize the use of nuclear weapons. Meanwhile, the world's second largest nuclear power, Russia, also uses a version of the nuclear football. Known as Shaget, the Russian nuclear briefcase was first introduced in the early 1980s during the administration of Yuri Andropov and is issued to the Russian president, minister of defense, and chief of the general staff. Like the American football, Shaget contains nuclear launch codes, a list of authorized targets, and a radio transceiver connected to a special military command and control network codenamed Kavkaz. In addition to transmitting launch codes, Shaget is also capable of receiving signals from the Kavkaz system, allowing the military to directly alert the president to a potential threat such as a missile launch. When an alert is received, all three holders of the Shaget must enter their individual launch codes in order to authorize a retaliatory strike, a process which takes around 20 minutes. However, unlike the United States, Russia has long maintained a command structure which grants commanders in the field the authority to launch nuclear strikes in extreme circumstances, such as the decapitation of the Russian leadership. Indeed, fear that a Russian officer in Cuba might independently authorize a missile launch was among the many factors which led President Kennedy to create the nuclear football system. While it is unclear whether the American nuclear football has ever been opened, the Shaget has been activated on at least one occasion. On January the 25th, 1995, the Olnogorsk early warning radar station in Murmansk, Russia, detected an object rising quickly above the Barents Sea. Its speed and trajectory matched that of an American Trident submarine-launched missile. At first, the radar operators dismissed the contact, reasoning that an actual American attack would involve multiple missiles. However, they soon realized that if the missile detonated in the upper atmosphere, it would generate an electromagnetic pulse, or EMP, and cripple the entire defense system, leaving Russia vulnerable to a second wave of missiles. An alert was thus sent out on the Kavkaz system, reaching President Boris Yeltsin, Defense Minister Pavel Grashev, and Chief of the General Staff Mikhail Kolesnikov in the Kremlin. All three men opened their Shaget suitcases and began entering their launch codes, while meanwhile the radio operators watched as the single contact split into three, the telltale signature of multiple warheads being released from a missile. But just as Yeltsin was preparing to authorize a retaliatory strike, the missile suddenly veered off course and headed north, falling back into the Barents Sea. Realizing that the contact had been a false alarm, Yeltsin called off the attack. The missile was later revealed to be a Black Branch research rocket launched from Norway as part of an experiment to study the Northern Lights. The Norwegians had informed the Russians of the launch weeks before, but somehow the Kremlin had not gotten the memo. As far as we know, this was the first and only time the Shaget had ever been activated, a close call made all the more frightening by the fact that it occurred a full 4 years after the collapse of the Soviet Union. The Cold War may be long over, but so long as nuclear weapons exist, the threat of Armageddon will remain a real, if remote, possibility. And now for a bonus fact. Because the command and control apparatus is so abstract and disconnected from the death and destruction it can unleash, it has long been argued that world leaders may not fully be able to grasp the implications of using nuclear weapons. In a March 1981 issue of the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists, Roger Fisher, a professor of law at Harvard University, suggested a unique, if gruesome, solution to the problem. My suggestion was quite simple. Put that needed code number in a little capsule and then implant it right next to the heart of a volunteer. The volunteer would carry with him a big, heavy butcher knife as he accompanied the president. If ever the president wanted to fire nuclear warheads, the only way he could do so would be for him first, with his own hands, to kill one human being. The president says, "George, I'm sorry, but tens of millions must die." He has to look at someone and realize what death is, what an innocent death is. Blood on the White House carpet. It's reality brought home. When I suggested this to friends in the Pentagon, they said, "My God, that's terrible. Having to kill someone would distort the president's judgment. He might never push the button." So I really hope you found that video interesting. If you did, please do hit that thumbs up button below. Don't forget to subscribe, and as always, thank you for watching.